I wondered what brought you to Rampart, why this was the next film that you wanted to make.
Well, there was no plan. Just like most things in life, I was hired to rewrite a James Ellroy script called Rampart, and it was a job. And once I did that, my intention in rewriting it, and he wrote this incredible script, but it was just sort of out of control. It was it was going to be an independent film, and it was completely unfilmable as an independent film. It had to be the biggest, studio film ever made for a very dark subject matter. So that was not going to happen. So I was brought in to work with the material and rewrite basically his script. And once I did, with a very clear agenda that I was going to out Elroy, and sort of try to write like him and sound like him and get into his head. And it was just a very dangerous thing to do.
Yes.
I presented the script to Lawrence Ingley, who was the producer of The Messenger and who was producing this, and he said, along with some other people in the company, he said, "Why don't you direct it?" And my first impulse is always to say no, and take it from there. But once I was on board, I was just intrigued by these characters, intrigued by the singular mind of James Ellroy, and what I wanted to try to do, since we were not exactly inventing the LAPD movie, is to try to find if there is a different way to convey the story and go deep into the mind of a character like that, which is a pretty typical James Ellroy character. And instead of telling the story about a conspiracy or telling a story about paranoia, actually telling a story about the demise of a character who is not willing to change in a time of great change. And sort of that was my attraction to it. And then I said that I would direct this movie if Woody Harrelson could be the lead, and luckily they said yes, and he said yes, and then we took it from there.
And can I just to go back to the writing for a minute? You've just described it as wanting to out Elroy, but I suspect there was more to it than that. And I guess I'm interested in what you brought to it, and particularly I suppose some of what we see of kind of Dave's kind of troubles, and the kind of the sort of interior kind of sense of him that we get. Was that you, or was that in the original script, or?
I don't remember. I think that, to me, going through the writing process, then ultimately through production, I started to sense that the family was the thing that I was sort of connecting to the most, and that the losing of the family was the thing that I personally would connect with, and Woody did as well, and everyone involved in the film. And so I don't, I can honestly tell you that if I watched the movie and started going through, like, what did Ellroy write, what did I write, what did they improvise, I would probably have a hard time remembering. But ultimately, I think it was a clash of agendas. Ellroy wrote the script, and he would tell you this if he was here and not being honored by the LAPD somewhere, or getting some award for being the best defender of cops anywhere, that his agenda was to exonerate the LAPD. He wrote a script that made it laughable to think that cops are bad. He wanted the fictional film that basically said the Rampart scandal, which was a real scandal, was a sham and a fiction in itself. My agenda is a little bit different. So I came into it with a desire to sort of investigate the humanity of this character, and to challenge us to look at a character who doesn't change, who doesn't really have an arc, and then ultimately feel like, have we changed in watching him, and then make it about the audience. And that's why it's sort of a film that shies at a certain point, just gives up on narrative and just goes into the possibilities of different kinds of narratives. So I think it's that clash of agendas that actually, if you like the movie, actually makes it work. If you don't like the movie, it's a total disaster of clash of agendas.
Yeah, I like it. I wanted to ask Ben next. Combining the role of being both the producer of the film and also acting in the film, are those two roles completely compatible for you? Was there ever a point where there was any tension between the two?
Well, it was the first time being behind the camera, and seeing the mechanism of how things are made, and we had a great first AD, Bill Clark, who's done all of Tarantino's films, and he's quite a legend within the world, within the industry. And he allowed for the two scenes that we were shooting to be at the end of the picture, towards the end of the shooting. So pre-production, how long? I mean, we were in 8 weeks. So said I needed to take 5 days off to get in the pocket or change hats and come back. So we had a very good organizer for that. Yeah, you can do that as a producer. Yeah, you can say change the schedule.
Organize yourself. And Woody, I wanted to ask you about sort of, getting into that kind of role, kind of starting to inhabit that character, because one of the things is that I think you lost quite a lot of weight to play him. How important? So he's very kind of sinewy, and he's very spare. There's not an ounce of kind of extra flesh on him. Was that kind of physicality something that was important for you in terms of kind of getting into the character? Was it where you started or where you got to with him?
Well, that was generated by the fact that Oren wanted the guy to be like 40 pounds overweight. I admire De Niro, but has anyone here tried to take off 40 pounds? I mean, sorry. But 60. But anyway, I do think it kind of, adds a little bit to the character.
Well, a lot of it was planned in advance, and Bobby Bukowski, who shot the film, and I kind of worked out the aesthetics of the film, and we wanted it to be sort of a super saturated, contrasty kind of movie where you see LA maybe for the first time in a different kind of way. And we had this whole thing about, we get very pretentious about these things, and actually when you get very pretentious, you come up with very practical ideas. Thank God. And what we did is sort of thinking about this character as sort of unhinged, led us to think about the movie as having a camera that's never locked. And it's actually, some people have written about this film as a handheld film. There's actually nothing handheld in this movie. It's always on a rig. The idea is that the camera is never locked. In most of the movies that are shot in LA, what you find is that people correct for a much more sort of perfect, even frame, and you find a lot of LA movies being sort of overcast or cloudy, and you sort of don't understand why it doesn't look like LA. So we were embracing, shooting into the sun, and then what we notice also is that people in Los Angeles, and stop me when it gets boring, but people in Los Angeles sort of have a way of controlling their environment only in their homes, because it's so uncontrollable outside their homes that a lot of times when you walk into a house, it's a lot darker than you would imagine, because it's that place where they can control the lighting, and sort of at night it's actually dim. So that's what we were working with, and sort of trying to sort of investigate the world of Los Angeles as it is, and then the world of Los Angeles in film, and sort of pray to do something a little bit different. Well, it's a personal choice to be satisfied by, living with two women or not. But I think that it came from James Ellroy, and it's something that a writer who wrote about this film, I think it was Oren Moverman in Entertainment Weekly, described it as very LA creepy. And there are all kinds of interesting situations there. I wouldn't be presumptuous to answer for James Ellroy, although I do know the answer. But he was very much in that headspace when he was writing that. And to me, it was intriguing, as I've worked on scripts actually in the past that had to do with a man who was married to two women at the same time in the year 999, and sort of different sort of scenarios of marriage. And I thought, I was intrigued by it. I thought I definitely wanted to keep that, because I thought, here's a guy living out the most extreme, and forgive me for saying this, and I say it with no agenda, the most extreme white man fantasy, of just power and sexuality and ownership and family, and I just wanted to watch him lose it all, personally. because of his refusal to change and evolve. So, you know, I kept it, and I was completely intrigued by it. Woody hated it and didn't want me to do it.
Woody hated what part of that? Hated the idea of the living with the two women, or hated the idea of the losing of it by not changing?
I thought it was an evolved kind of thing. You know, I don't see what you mean by he refuses to evolve. I thought they were evolved. The families, they're all getting along. It's an ideal situation. Everybody's happy. Well, with a part like this, it's relatively, you know what? No, with a part like this, it's kind of hard to detach. You know, this guy was sleeping out there on the street in Los Angeles several nights, like rain. So he's not detaching. But I find it hard to detach because, you know, there's a lot of things that go on in, you know, trying to get yourself in the headspace of a character, obviously, but, you know, the concept of, you know, hanging out and doing ride-alongs with cops and just getting into the cop mentality and reading books. But the hardest thing for me was this character is immersed in a level of paranoia that I don't personally like to steep myself in that kind of mentality. Yeah, so that was the hardest thing for me. I couldn't really shut off that little paranoia mechanism.
When we made The Messenger, I had, you know, I had time to think about these things, and I felt like as the director, I was able to dedicate the movie to someone, and I kind of thought, you know, that's a strange concept, along with a lot of other strange concepts, and I thought, why don't we ask everyone in the movie to dedicate the movie to someone, means something to them. In The Messenger, we asked everyone who worked on the movie, the cast and the crew, to dedicate the movie to someone they lost. And so at the end, there were all these credits, you know, these cards with all these names of people who the movie's dedicated to. And when we made this one, I just asked people to dedicate it to someone they love, because I do feel that, you know, so much of this movie is about being careful with what you do in life, because at the end of it, there are consequences. And then the most horrifying thing is the idea of, you know, sort of losing the people you love and not being able to engage with them anymore, and standing outside their house and watching them have a life without you. And sort of that was kind of the very short version of what this movie was about, which was basically, you know, if the people in your life who you love, you should embrace and hug. And that was sort of what we were going for with this movie. So we asked everyone to dedicate it to someone they love, and then of course some wise asses like, I shouldn't mention his name, you know, started dedicating it to other people who they didn't love. But it ended up being that, you know, whoever you dedicated to the movie to, we put it on the screen, and that's sort of the way I like to think of making a movie, as a collective and as a coming together of people who embrace, you know, a shared experience and ultimately get something out of it. It's also a really neat trick. We'll get to you later. It's also a very neat trick to get people who worked on the movie to buy the DVDs, because, you know, it goes by so fast that you have to buy the DVDs to pause it and show the people you love that you actually dedicated the movie to. So
who was the guy?
Who was the guy? Oh no, somebody dedicated it to, you know, victims of the Rampart scandal and people like that, which is fine. Somebody dedicated it to Jesus Christ. I don't know if it made it onto it. We're still debating that one.
Debating Jesus?
Always.